The courtroom was silent. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy watched from their seats, their many eyes fixed on the single human standing in the center of the chamber. Some had tentacles. Some had scales. Some floated in liquid tanks because they could not breathe air. But all of them stared at Lieutenant Tejo with the same expression: pity. Tejo stood with his hands bound behind his back. He was 32 years old, born in a small town near the eastern coast of Korea on Earth. He had joined the United Fleet when he was 23. And he had spent the last 9 years flying cargo ships between star systems. He was not a soldier. He was not a warrior. He was just a pilot who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The Galactic High Tribunal sat above him on a raised platform. 12 judges from 12 different species looked down at him like he was an insect. Their robes were silver and gold, and their faces showed no emotion. Behind them, a massive window revealed the stars outside. The station floated at the center of neutral space, far from any single empire's territory. Lieutenant Tejo of Earth, the head judge announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. You have been found guilty of destroying Valanthe diplomatic vessel Serenus and killing all 43 beings aboard. The evidence has been reviewed. The verdict is final. Tejo wanted to scream. He wanted to tell them again what really happened. The Serenus had not been a diplomatic ship when he encountered it. Pirates had taken control of it. They had killed the original crew and used the ship to attack cargo vessels in the outer systems. When they attacked Tejo's ship, he had no choice but to fight back. But the Valanthe did not care about the truth. They only cared about blood. I acted in self-defense, Tejo said. His voice was calm, but his heart was beating fast. The black box recordings prove this. The pirates fired first. I had no choice. A sound came from the left side of the chamber. It was laughter, cold and sharp. Tejo turned to see the Valanthe ambassador rising from his seat. His name was Orvalis, and he was the reason Tejo was here. Orvalis was pale white, almost like snow. He had 8 long limbs that moved like liquid, and his face had no nose or mouth, only 2 large black eyes and a slit that opened when he spoke. He wore robes of deep purple, the color of Valanthe nobility. Self-defense, Orvalis repeated, his voice dripping with mockery. A human speaks of self-defense after destroying one of our sacred vessels. The Serenus carried diplomats, peacemakers, and this creature burned them alive. Those diplomats were already dead, Tejo replied. Killed by the pirates who took the ship. I have shown you the evidence. Evidence can be created, Orvalis said smoothly. Humans are known for their deception. Tejo felt anger rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry would not help him here. The Valanthe had powerful friends, and Earth was still new to galactic politics. Humanity had only made first contact 30 years ago. They were considered a minor species, primitive and unimportant. The head judge raised one of his 4 hands. The tribunal has heard all arguments. The evidence presented by the human has been deemed insufficient. The testimony of Ambassador Orvalis and the Valanthe government takes precedence. Behind Tejo, he heard a small sound. He turned his head slightly and saw Yuna sitting in the observation area. She was his co-pilot and his closest friend. They had served together for 5 years. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands were shaking. Tejo, she whispered, but a guard silenced her with a sharp look. The head judge continued. Under Valanthe law, which has been accepted by this tribunal for this case, the punishment for the destruction of a diplomatic vessel is death. Tejo felt the word hit him like a physical blow. Death. He had expected it, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. However, the judge said, Ambassador Orvalis has requested a specific form of execution, one that is permitted under ancient galactic law. Orvalis stepped forward, and his black eyes gleamed with satisfaction. I invoke the right of Cathara, he announced. The human will be exiled to Cathara. 7. The courtroom erupted. Beings gasped, shouted, and some even screamed. Tejo looked around in confusion. He had never heard of Cathara 7. A creature beside Yuna fainted. Another began to pray in a language Tejo did not understand. Even some of the judges looked disturbed. Order, the head judge demanded. There will be order in this chamber. Slowly, the noise died down. Tejo looked at Orvalis. What is Cathara 7? Orvalis smiled. At least, Tejo thought it was a smile. The slit on his face opened wider, revealing rows of tiny teeth. It is a Class X Deathworld, he said, the most dangerous planet in the known galaxy. No sentient being has ever survived longer than 3 rotations there. The gravity will crush you. The predators will eat you. The atmosphere will poison you. It is a fate worse than any simple execution. Tejo processed this information. A Deathworld. A planet so dangerous that no one survived more than 3 days. Orvalis was not just killing him. He was making sure Tejo suffered first. The tribunal accepts this request. The head judge said. The human will be transported to Cathara. 7 within 1 standard cycle. He will be stripped of all technology and given only a basic survival suit. Surveillance drones will document his final hours, as required by law. Yuna stood up. This is murder, she shouted. This is not justice. You are sending an innocent man to die on a nightmare planet because the Volanthi are too proud to admit the truth. Guards moved toward her. But she did not stop. The black box proves everything. The pirates attacked first. Tejo saved lives that day. Human lives. And you are punishing him for it. Remove her. Orvalis commanded. 2 guards grabbed Yuna and began dragging her toward the exit. She fought against them. But they were too strong. Tejo, she screamed. I will not let this happen. I will find a way. I promise. Tejo watched her disappear through the doors. Then he turned back to face the tribunal. The judges were already preparing to leave, their decision made. Orvalis stood nearby, watching him with those cold black eyes. Do you have any final words? The head judge asked. It was a formality. Nothing more. Tejo thought for a moment. He thought about Earth, about his family, about the mountains he used to climb as a child. He thought about all the camping trips with his father, all the nights spent under the stars learning how to survive in the wilderness. He thought about what it meant to be human. Then he looked at Orvalis and asked a simple question. What is the weather like on Cathara 7? Orvalis blinked. His 8 limbs twitched in confusion. What? The weather, Tejo repeated. Is it hot? Cold? Rainy? I want to know what to expect. The courtroom fell silent again. No one had ever asked such a question before an execution. Condemned prisoners usually begged for mercy or cursed their judges. They did not ask about weather. It does not matter, Orvalis said slowly. You will be dead within hours. Tejo shrugged. Maybe, but I like to be prepared. He saw something flicker in Orvalis's eyes. It might have been doubt. It might have been fear. Tejo was not sure. But he held on to that moment, as the guards led him away. Humans, the galaxy would soon learn, did not understand when they were supposed to be afraid. And that made them very dangerous indeed. The transport ship broke through the atmosphere of Cathara 7, and Tejo got his first look at the planet that was supposed to kill him. Through the small window of his holding cell, he saw a world of fire and shadow. Volcanoes dotted the landscape, sending plumes of black smoke into an orange sky. Rivers of lava cut through dark forests, and massive creatures moved between the trees like living mountains. It was beautiful, in a terrifying way. The guard standing outside his cell was a Morvani, a reptilian species with blue scales and yellow eyes. He had not spoken a word to Tejo during the entire journey, but now he looked at the human with something like curiosity. You are not screaming, the guard said. Others scream when they see Cathara. Tejo turned away from the window. Should I be screaming? Most do. The last prisoner we brought here, a Valanthi criminal, lost his mind before we even entered the atmosphere. He begged us to kill him quickly instead. And did you? The guard shook his head. The law is the law. He was dropped, just like you will be. Tejo nodded and returned his attention to the window. The ship was descending now, moving toward a flat area near the edge of a dark forest. He could see the surveillance drones already in position. Small silver spheres floating in the air. They would record everything. His suffering. His death. Ambassador Orvalis would probably watch it with pleasure. The ship landed with a heavy thud. Tejo felt the increased gravity immediately. It pressed down on him like an invisible weight, making every movement harder. The briefing documents had said Cathara 7 had gravity at 1.3 times Earth standard. It was uncomfortable, but not unbearable. Humans had trained in higher gravity before. The cell door opened, and 2 guards entered. They removed his restraints and handed him a thin survival suit. It was gray and simple, designed only to protect against minor temperature changes. It would not stop a predator's claws or a volcanic eruption. Put this on, one guard said. You have 5 minutes. Tejo changed quickly. The suit fit poorly, designed for species with different body shapes, but it was better than nothing. When he was ready, the guards led him to the main hatch. The Morvani guard was waiting there. In his hands, he held a small pack. Basic supplies, he explained. Water purification tablets. A fire starter. A knife. This is all you are permitted by law. Tejo took the pack and strapped it to his back. Thank you. The guard looked surprised. You thank me? I am sending you to die. You are doing your job. There is no shame in that. For a moment, the guard seemed like he wanted to say something more. But then, the hatch began to open, and the sounds of Cathara 7 flooded the ship. Screams of distant creatures, the rumble of volcanic activity, wind howling through alien forests. Good luck, human, the guard said quietly. You will need it. Tejo stepped out of the ship and onto the surface of Cathara 7. The heat hit him immediately. Thick and heavy. The air smelled like sulfur and rotting vegetation. The ground beneath his feet was black rock, still warm from ancient lava flows. Behind him, the ship's hatch closed. He heard the engines power up, and moments later, the transport rose into the sky and disappeared into the orange clouds. He was alone. Tejo stood still for a long moment, taking in his surroundings. The surveillance drones circled overhead, their lights blinking red. Somewhere out there, Orvalis was watching, waiting for him to panic, waiting for him to die. But Tejo did not panic. Instead, he did something that would confuse every alien watching. He smiled. What they did not understand, what they could not understand, was that Tejo had grown up on a Deathworld too. Earth. His homeworld. The planet where humans had evolved alongside predators that could crush bones with a single bite. The planet where ice ages had nearly wiped out their entire species. The planet where volcanoes, earthquakes, floods, and diseases had killed billions over millions of years. Humans were survivors. It was written in their blood. Tejo remembered his father's words from long ago, during a camping trip in the mountains of Korea. They had been caught in a sudden storm, freezing rain pouring down while thunder shook the sky. Young Tejo had been terrified, but his father had remained calm. The wilderness does not hate you, his father had said. It does not want to kill you. It simply exists. If you respect it, if you learn its rules, you can survive. Fear is useful, but panic is death. Tejo took a deep breath and began to analyze his situation. First priority, shelter. The temperature would drop significantly at night, and he needed protection from predators while he slept. Second priority, water. The purification tablets would help, but he needed to find a source. Third priority, Weapons. The knife was useful, but he would need more if he encountered the larger creatures. He scanned the landscape. The forest to his right looked dense and dark. Not a good first choice. To his left, he could see rocky hills with what appeared to be cave openings. That was more promising. He began walking toward the hills. The increased gravity made each step harder. But Tejo had trained for this kind of endurance. Humans were persistence hunters. Their ancestors had chased prey across African savannas for hours, wearing them down through sheer stamina. A little extra gravity would not stop him. As he walked, he noticed the creatures watching him from the forest's edge. They were low to the ground, with multiple legs and eyes that reflected the dim light. Predators. Definitely. But they did not attack. They were curious, studying this new arrival. That is right, Tejo muttered to himself. Take your time. Figure out if I am worth the trouble. He reached the hills as the sky began to darken. The caves were exactly what he had hoped for. Deep enough to provide shelter, narrow enough to defend. He chose one near the middle, where he could see approaches from multiple directions. Inside, he found the remains of some creature that had died long ago. Bones and dried flesh. Not pleasant, but useful. He dragged the remains outside and used them to mark his territory. Many predators avoided areas that smelled of death. Next, he gathered wood. The forest was dangerous, but he moved quickly and quietly, taking only what he needed. Back in the cave, he used the fire starter from his pack to create a small flame. It took several tries, but eventually, the wood caught. Fire, warmth, light. Tejo sat by the fire and ate nothing. He had no food yet, and he would not waste energy searching in the dark. Tomorrow, he would hunt. Tonight, he would rest and plan. He thought about Yuna. He thought about her promise to help him. He did not know how she could possibly reach him here, but he believed her. Yuna was stubborn. She was loyal. She would not give up, but he could not rely on rescue. He had to assume he was on his own. He had to survive long enough to prove everyone wrong. Outside the cave, something screamed in the darkness. It was a terrible sound, high and sharp, like metal tearing. Other creatures answered, their voices rising in a chorus of hunger and rage. The night on Cathara 7 had begun, and every predator was awake. Tejo added more wood to his fire. The flames grew higher, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. Most creatures feared fire. It was one of humanity's oldest tools, the thing that had separated them from other animals on Earth. He thought about the surveillance drones still circling outside. He knew Orvalis was watching, expecting him to be dead by morning. The thought made him angry, but he used that anger to fuel his determination. Day 1, he said aloud, his voice echoing in the cave. I am still alive. He lay down near the fire, his knife in his hand, and closed his eyes. Sleep would not come easily, but he forced himself to rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, but also new opportunities. Somewhere across the galaxy, in a comfortable office on the Valanthi homeworld, Ambassador Orvalis watched the feed from Cathara 7 with growing annoyance. The human had not died. The human had not even suffered. He had simply walked to shelter, made fire, and gone to sleep. It was impossible. It was insulting. Increase the drone coverage, Orvalis commanded. I want to see every moment of his death. But deep in his cold heart, something uncomfortable stirred. Something that felt almost like doubt. He pushed it away and continued watching. The human slept peacefully by his fire, and the planet of death could not touch him. 30 days had passed on Cathara 7, and Tejo was still alive. The Galactic High Tribunal had expected to receive death confirmation within the first week. Instead, they received something that shook their understanding of what a human could do. The surveillance drones captured everything, and what they captured was impossible. In the tribunal's monitoring room, a dozen officials from different species watched the feeds in stunned silence. They saw Tejo wake each morning before dawn. They saw him check his traps, which he had built from branches and vines. They saw him sharpen his weapons, crude spears made from stone and wood. They saw him hunt creatures twice his size, and win. "This cannot be real," one official whispered. He was a Morvani, the same species as the guard who had dropped Tejo on the planet. "The human is not just surviving," another official said. She was a Telvanni, a species known for their analytical minds. "He is thriving. Look at his camp. Look at his tools. He has adapted to this environment faster than any species in recorded history." The screens showed Tejo's home base. It was no longer a simple cave. He had expanded it, clearing rocks and creating separate areas for sleeping, cooking, and storage. Outside, he had built a wall of sharpened stakes to keep predators away. He had dug a trench that diverted water from a nearby stream. He had created a small garden where he was testing different plants for food. Most disturbing of all, he had a pet. The creature was called a Veth on galactic charts. It was a pack predator, native to Cathara, 7, known for its venomous bite and aggressive nature. Veths hunted in groups and could take down prey 10 times their size. They were considered one of the most dangerous animals on the planet, but this Veth followed Tejo everywhere. It slept outside his cave. It brought him fresh kills. It growled at anything that came too close to him. He called it Bomi. The story of how Tejo had tamed the creature was captured on drone footage. 2 weeks after his arrival, he had heard strange sounds coming from a rocky area near his camp. He had investigated and found a young Veth trapped under fallen stones. A rock slide had caught it, and it was slowly dying. Any other being would have killed it. Veths were dangerous even when injured, but Tejo had not killed it. Instead, he had spent hours carefully moving the stones, freeing the creature one rock at a time. When the Veth was finally free, it was too weak to attack. Tejo had carried it back to his cave, cleaned its wounds, and fed it meat from his supplies. For 3 days, he had cared for the creature. He had expected it to attack him when it recovered, but when the Veth finally regained its strength, it had simply looked at him with its many eyes and licked his hand. "He saved my life," the gesture seemed to say. "I will not forget." From that day forward, Bomi had been Tejo's constant companion. The Veth's presence kept other predators away. Its hunting instincts helped Tejo find prey. Its senses warned him of danger before he could see it himself. Humans, the Watchers were learning, had a strange ability. They could form bonds with creatures that should have been their enemies. They could turn predators into allies. It was a skill that went back to Earth's ancient past, when humans had first tamed wolves and turned them into dogs. But the surveillance showed more than just survival. It showed something that truly frightened the Galactic Tribunal. Tejo was leaving markers. Throughout the territory he controlled, he had carved symbols into rock faces. He had arranged stones in patterns. He had created signs that pointed in specific directions. At first, the officials thought he was going mad, creating meaningless art to stay sane. Then the xenolinguists decoded the symbols. They were not random. They were not art. They were maps, warnings, and survival instructions. They were written in Korean, an Earth language. "He is creating a guide," the Telvanni official realized with horror. "He expects others to come. He is preparing for human colonization of this world." And did not too. Armin resuited. And did not he was world. The room fell silent. The idea was absurd. No species would willingly colonize a Class X Deathworld. The resources required would be enormous. The death toll would be unacceptable. But humans, apparently, did not think like other species. Across the galaxy, Ambassador Orvalis received daily reports on the humans' progress. Each report made him angrier than the last. The execution was supposed to be a message. It was supposed to show all species what happened when you defied the Volanthi. Instead, it had become a demonstration of human stubbornness. "Send more predators," Orvalis commanded. "Release the apex hunters into his territory." His advisors hesitated. "Ambassador, the tribunal may question additional interference. The law states that prisoners must face the natural dangers of the planet, not artificial ones. The law also allows for environmental management," Orvalis snapped. "We are simply ensuring the planet remains dangerous. Do it." 3 apex predators were transported to Cathara 7 and released near Teho's camp. They were massive creatures, each one the size of a small shuttle. They had thick armor-like skin, razor-sharp claws, and jaws that could bite through metal. On galactic databases, they were called Ketharan Crushers, and they were the reason no permanent settlement had ever survived on the planet. Orvalis watched the drone feeds with anticipation. Finally, the human would die. But Teho did not die. He heard the Crushers coming long before they arrived. The ground shook with their footsteps. Birds fled from the trees. Even Bomi grew nervous, pressing against Teho's legs and whimpering. Teho studied the situation calmly. 3 Crushers. Too big to fight directly. Too strong to trap easily. He needed another approach. He remembered something his father had once told him about hunting dangerous animals. A direct fight is always the last option. Smart hunters use the environment. They use the animal's own strength against it. Teho looked at the landscape around his camp. The rocky hills, the steep cliffs, the narrow passes. An idea formed in his mind. He spent 2 days preparing. He dug pits and covered them with branches. He loosened rocks on the hillside. He created trails of meat, leading toward specific locations, and when everything was ready, he let the Crushers find him. The first one fell into a pit trap. It was not deep enough to kill the creature, but the sharpened stakes at the bottom wounded it badly. It roared in pain and could not climb out. The second one chased Teho up a narrow mountain path. When the creature reached a specific point, Teho triggered his trap. The loosened rocks above came crashing down, burying the Crusher under tons of stone. The third one was smarter. It did not fall for the traps. It stalked Teho carefully, waiting for the right moment to strike. For 3 days, the human and the predator played a deadly game of patience. On the 4th day, Teho made his move. He had noticed that the Crusher always approached from the same direction. Always at the same time. Creatures of habit. Even apex predators had patterns. He waited in a tree above the creature's path, a heavy stone spear in his hands. When the Crusher passed beneath him, he dropped onto its back. The creature thrashed wildly, but Teho held on. He drove his spear into the one weak spot he had identified, a small gap in the armor behind the creature's head. The Crusher screamed and fell. It was not dead, but it was badly wounded. Teho rolled away and watched as the massive creature struggled to rise. It looked at him with something like fear in its eyes. Then it turned and fled. Back on the Volanthi homeworld, Orvalis stared at the footage in disbelief. 2 Crushers dead. 1 fled in terror, and the human stood in the middle of the battlefield, covered in blood that was not his own, his primitive spear raised in victory. He looked directly at a surveillance drone. And Orvalis had the disturbing feeling that the human was looking directly at him. "Is that all you have?" Teho seemed to be asking. "Is that the best you can do?" Orvalis did not answer. He could not answer. For the first time in his long life, the Volanthi ambassador did not know what to say. On Cathara 7, Teho returned to his camp. Bomi greeted him with excited sounds, circling around him and checking for injuries. He was tired. He was bruised. But he was alive. He added a new marker to his collection of signs. This one was simple. It showed 3 creatures with lines through them. A warning to any future visitors. Dangerous predators in this area, the symbol said, can be defeated, and somewhere deep in the dark forest, the surviving crusher watched from a distance. It did not approach. It did not attack. It had learned what other creatures on Cathara 7 were beginning to understand. The human was not prey. The human was a predator. And wise animals did not challenge predators in their own territory. Yuna had not slept in 3 days. Since Taeho's sentencing, she had been working without rest. She had traveled to 7 different star systems, met with dozens of contacts, and spent every credit she had on information and equipment. She had been thrown out of government offices, threatened by Valanthi agents, and nearly arrested twice, but she had not given up. She had made a promise. Now she sat in a small room on a station at the edge of known space. Around her were 5 other beings, representatives from species who believed in justice over politics. There was Corvin, a Morvani engineer who had lost his brother to Valanthi cruelty. There was Mira, a Telvanni programmer with skills that bordered on illegal. There was Dasan, a massive Krovic warrior who spoke little but watched everything. And there were 2 humans, a brother and sister named Jinho and Suri, who had volunteered the moment they heard about Taeho's situation. On the table between them was a device no larger than a human hand. It looked simple, but it represented months of work and enormous risk. "Are you sure this will work?" Yuna asked Mira. The Telvanni's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "The tribunal's surveillance system is highly protected, but every system has weaknesses. I have found a path through their security. Once we activate this device, we will have approximately 3 minutes before they trace the signal and shut us down." 3 minutes is not long, Corvin said. 3 minutes will be enough, Yuna replied. The entire galaxy will see what we broadcast. They will not be able to unsee it. She looked at the screens on the wall. They showed the current feed from Cathara 7, the feed that only tribunal officials were supposed to see. Taeho was there, working in his camp. He looked thin but strong. He was building something new, a structure that might have been a storage building or a second shelter. Bami lay nearby, watching him with loyal eyes. 3 months. Taeho had survived 3 months on a planet that should have killed him in days, and the galaxy had no idea. "The Valanthi have been suppressing information," Yuna explained to the group. "They told the public that Taeho died on the first night. They said the execution was successful, but the tribunal's own surveillance proves otherwise. If we show the truth, if we show what humans can really do, everything changes." Jinho leaned forward. He was young, barely 20, with the same determined expression Yuna had seen on Taeho's face. "My sister and I joined this mission because of what the Valanthi did. They call us a primitive species. They treat us like animals. It is time they learned the truth about humanity." "Ango." "Probably." His sister Suri nodded. "Earth is a death world. Our homeworld is classified as Category 4 inches. Galactic records. We evolved alongside predators, disasters, and diseases that would have destroyed weaker species. If one human can survive Cathara 7, it proves what we have always known. Humans are not weak. We are survivors." Dasan, the Krovic warrior, finally spoke. His voice was deep and rumbling. "My people respect strength. We have watched the feeds from Cathara 7. What the human has done is impressive. It deserves to be seen." Asker, Yuna took a deep breath. This was the moment. If they failed, they would all be arrested. The Valanthi would make sure they disappeared quietly. But if they succeeded, they could change everything. "Do it," she said. Mira activated the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every screen in the room flickered, and a message appeared. Connection established. Across the galaxy, something impossible occurred. Every public broadcast channel, every news feed, every entertainment screen suddenly switched to the same image. Billions of beings stopped what they were doing and stared at their screens in confusion. They saw a planet of fire and shadow. They saw a human standing in the middle of a wilderness that should have killed him. They saw him hunt, build, survive, and thrive on the most dangerous world in known space. The broadcast showed everything. It showed Tejo's first night, when he calmly made shelter instead of panicking. It showed him taming Bomi, the venomous predator that now protected him. It showed him defeating 3 apex crushers with nothing but traps, stones, and human determination. And it showed the markers he had carved, the maps, the survival guides, the proof that he was not just surviving, he was preparing for others to follow. A voice accompanied the images. It was Yuna's voice, calm and clear. "This is Lieutenant Tejo of Earth. He was sentenced to death by the Galactic High Tribunal for a crime he did not commit. He was dropped on Cathara 7, a Class X Deathworld, and expected to die within days. But Tejo did not die. He survived, and he continues to survive. 3 months later, the Valanthi told you he was dead. They lied. The tribunal covered up his survival because it embarrasses them, because it proves that their ancient laws are cruel and unjust, because it shows that humans are not the primitive species they want you to believe we are. Watch this footage. See what one human can do when faced with impossible odds. And ask yourself, if they lied about this, what else have they lied about? The broadcast continued for exactly 2 minutes and 57 seconds. Then, the screens flickered again, and normal programming resumed. But the damage was done. On 100 different worlds, beings began to talk. They shared clips from the broadcast on personal networks. They debated in public forums. They asked questions that the Valanthi did not want them to ask. Old footage of humans began to circulate. Footage of human athletes running marathons through deserts. Footage of human explorers climbing mountains that touched the sky. Footage of humans diving into freezing oceans, fighting wildfires, and surviving disasters that would have eliminated entire species. One clip became especially popular. It showed humans on Earth doing something called camping. They deliberately went into wilderness areas, exposed themselves to weather and predators, and called it recreation. They did for fun what other species considered a death sentence. Deathworlders, people began to call them. The word spread like wildfire. On Earth, the broadcast created a sensation. Tejo's face appeared on every screen. His story was told in every language. His family, who had been told he was dead, discovered that their son and brother was still alive. His younger sister, Nari, stood before the United Earth Council and demanded action. She was 25 years old, with fire in her eyes and her brother's stubbornness in her heart. "The Valanthi tried to kill my brother," she declared. "They failed. Now they are trying to hide their failure. Earth cannot allow this. Humanity cannot allow this. We must demand justice. We must demand Tejo's return." Her speech was broadcast across Earth and beyond. Protests erupted outside Valanthi embassies on 12 different worlds. Humans and non-humans stood together, holding signs and chanting Tejo's name. On the Valanthi homeworld, Ambassador Orvalis faced a crisis. His careful plans had collapsed. His reputation was in ruins. The other noble families were questioning his judgment, and enemies he had made over centuries were circling like predators. "How did this happen?" he demanded of his advisors. "How did they access our surveillance?" No one had answers. Mira's hack had been perfect. There was no trail to follow, no evidence to examine. The broadcast had come from nowhere and disappeared into nothing. "We must respond," one advisor said. "The public is demanding explanations. There is nothing to explain." Orvalis snapped. "The human should be dead. The fact that he is not is meaningless. He will die eventually. They all die. Eventually." But his words sounded hollow, even to himself. He looked at the reports from Cathara 7, at the latest footage of Tejo working in his camp, and felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. On Cathara 7, Tejo knew nothing of what was happening across the galaxy. He did not know about the broadcast, or the protests, or his sister's speech. He simply continued his routine, surviving one day at a time. But he noticed something strange. The surveillance drones that had followed him for months seemed more numerous now. Their lights blinked constantly, as if many more beings were watching. "I wonder what is happening out there," he said to Bomi. The Veth looked up at him and made a questioning sound. "Something has changed. I can feel it." He looked up at the orange sky of Cathara 7 and allowed himself a small hope. But he did not wait for rescue. He never waited. He woke each morning and worked to survive. He improved his camp, expanded his territory, and continued leaving markers for those who might follow. Because that was what humans did. They did not give up. They did not surrender. They faced impossible odds and found a way to win. And somewhere across the stars, billions of beings were watching him and learning this truth for themselves. One standard galactic year had passed since Tejo was dropped on Cathara 7. In that time, he had transformed a section of the deadly planet into something remarkable. His camp had grown into a small settlement. He had multiple shelters now, storage buildings filled with preserved food, and a water system that brought clean water from the mountain stream. He had mapped hundreds of square kilometers of territory and left markers throughout, creating a network of survival information for anyone who might follow. His garden had expanded. Through careful testing and occasional sickness, he had identified dozens of edible plants. Some he had learned to cook, to remove toxins. Others he ate raw. He had even begun experimenting with cultivation, planting seeds in cleared areas to see what would grow. Bomi had grown larger and stronger. The Veth was now twice the size it had been when Tejo rescued it. A formidable predator in its own right. But it remained loyal to the human who had saved its life. Other Veths had begun appearing near the camp, drawn by curiosity about this strange pack of two. Tejo did not try to tame them, but he did not drive them away either. They kept a respectful distance, and that was enough. He had created armor from the creatures he had killed. Crusher hide protected his chest and shoulders. Bones had been shaped into tools and weapons. His original survival suit had long since fallen apart, replaced by clothing made from plant fibers and animal skins. He looked less like a starship pilot now, and more like something from Earth's ancient past. A hunter. A survivor. A human. In his natural state. On the morning of his 365th day on Cathara 7, Tejo woke to an unusual sound. It was distant at first. A low rumble that made the ground vibrate. He grabbed his spear and stepped outside the cave, scanning the sky. A ship was descending through the orange clouds. It was not a prison transport this time. This ship was larger, sleeker, marked with symbols from multiple species. As it lowered toward the clearing near his camp, Tejo recognized the design. It was a diplomatic vessel. Bomi growled beside him, sensing his tension. He placed a hand on the creature's head. "Easy. Let us see what they want." Quote, "End Indi. Lovera. Andi." The ship landed, and a ramp extended from its side. Tejo watched as figures emerged. He saw uniforms from the Galactic High Tribunal, but he also saw something else, something that made his heart race. Humans. There were humans on that ship. Yuna was the first to reach him. She ran across the rocky ground, not caring about the dangerous terrain, and threw her arms around him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Words were not necessary. "I kept my promise," she finally said, her voice breaking. "I know," he replied. "I never doubted you." Behind Yuna came others. His sister Nari, who had grown from the young girl he remembered into a fierce woman. Jinho and Suri, the siblings who had helped broadcast his survival. Representatives from Earth's government, wearing formal uniforms and expressions of awe. And there were aliens too. The Morvani engineer Corvin, who nodded at him with respect. The Telvanni programmer, Mira, whose 4 eyes studied his camp with scientific interest. The massive Krovic warrior Dasan, who looked at Tejo's armor and weapons with something like approval. A voice called from the ship. "Lieutenant Tejo of Earth, please approach. The Galactic High Tribunal has summoned you." Tejo looked at Yuna. She smiled. "It is time. The law says any being who survives a Deathworld exile for 1 full cycle must be granted freedom." The Valanthi tried to argue against it, but they lost. "You are free." He processed this information. Free. After a year of survival, after everything he had endured, he was finally free. But there was more to do. He turned to his camp, to the markers and shelters and everything he had built. "What happens to this?" "That," said a voice from the ship, "is what the tribunal wishes to discuss." An hour later, Tejo stood in the same courtroom where he had been sentenced to die. The chamber looked the same, but everything had changed. Where there had been pity in the eyes of the observers before, now there was amazement. Where there had been silence, now there was excited murmuring, and Tejo himself was different. He entered the chamber wearing his crusher armor, his weapons at his side, Bami padding silently beside him. The judges stared at him, as if he were a creature from myth. Ambassador Orvalis was there too, but his position had changed. He no longer sat in the honored place, reserved for diplomats. He stood at the side of the chamber, surrounded by guards. His 8 limbs were bound. "Lieutenant Tejo," the head judge announced, "you have survived 1 full galactic cycle on Cathara 7, a Class X Deathworld. Under Section 7 of the Ancient Exile Laws, you are hereby granted full freedom and absolution of all charges. The verdict against you is overturned." A cheer erupted from the human delegation. Nari grabbed Yuna's hand and squeezed it tightly. Even some of the alien observers applauded, but Orvalis stepped forward, fighting against his guards. "This is absurd," he shouted. "The law was never meant to apply to lesser species. Humans are primitive. They are animals." This trial was legal and proper. "Silence," the judge commanded. "Ambassador Orvalis, you face your own charges. Evidence has emerged that you manipulated this tribunal. You suppressed testimony. You bribed witnesses. You interfered with the exile by releasing additional predators, a direct violation of ancient law." Orvalis's pale face grew even paler. "I demand to speak with my government. Your government has already spoken. They have stripped you of your rank and title. You will face justice for your crimes." The guards led Orvalis away. He struggled against them, still shouting protests. But no one listened. The being who had tried to use ancient laws to commit murder would now face those same laws himself. When the chamber was calm again, the head judge addressed Tejo. "Lieutenant, there is one more matter to discuss. Your survival on Cathara 7 has attracted significant attention. Many species are now interested in humanity and your capabilities." He paused. "Additionally, your preparations on the planet's surface have raised questions. The markers you left, the maps, the survival guides. It appears you were expecting others to follow." Tejo nodded. "I was. May we ask why?" Tejo looked around the chamber. He saw beings from dozens of species, all watching him, all waiting for his answer. He thought about everything he had experienced on Cathara 7, the fear, the pain, the loneliness, but also the beauty, the challenge, the strange sense of home he had found there. "I am a human," he said simply. "We come from a death world too. Earth. When our ancestors faced dangerous environments, they did not just survive. They settled. They built. They turned wilderness into home." He looked at the head judge. "Cathara 7 is dangerous, but it has resources. Fresh water, edible plants, creatures that can be tamed. With proper preparation, with the knowledge I have gained, humans could live there, not just survive, Live. The chamber fell silent. The judge exchanged glances with his colleagues. Are you saying, the judge asked slowly, that humanity wishes to colonize Kethera 7? I am saying that I would like to return. And I suspect I would not go alone. From the human delegation, voices rose in agreement. Jinho stepped forward. I would go. My sister would go. After watching the broadcasts, thousands of humans have expressed interest. We have received applications from scientists, engineers, farmers, soldiers. Everyone wants to be part of this. The judge leaned back in his seat. This tribunal does not have authority over planetary settlement. But I will say this. What Lieutenant Tejo has done is unprecedented. He has shown that what we call Deathworlds may simply be worlds we have not tried hard enough to understand. He looked at Tejo with something like respect. If humanity wishes to claim Kethera 7, I do not believe anyone in this galaxy would dare to stop you. Outside the tribunal station, Tejo stood with his family and friends. Stars stretched out in every direction, billions of lights representing billions of possibilities. Yuna was at his side. Nari held his hand. Bomi sat at his feet, watching the strange environment with curious eyes. What will you do now? Yuna asked. Tejo thought about the question. He thought about Earth, his homeworld, a planet he had not seen in over a year. He thought about Kethera 7, the world that had tried to kill him and failed. He thought about the future. First, I am going home, he said. I want to see Korea again. I want to walk in the mountains where my father taught me to survive. He paused. Then I am going back to Kethera 7. There is good land there. Clean water. Room to grow. I have been thinking about building something more permanent. A settlement. Maybe even a town. You are going to colonize a death world, Yuna said, half question and half statement. I am going to turn a death world into a home. He smiled. It is what humans do. Behind them, the tribunal station hummed with activity. Reporters from 100 species were broadcasting the day's events across the galaxy. The story of the human who had survived the unsurvivable was spreading, changing perceptions, challenging assumptions. Humanity had entered the galactic community as a minor species, primitive and overlooked. Today, they left as something else. Not conquerors, not rulers, something more fundamental. Survivors, adapters, beings who looked at impossible challenges and saw opportunities. Tejo turned toward the ship that would take him home. His family walked with him. His friends followed. And somewhere, deep in his heart, he could still hear his father's voice from long ago. The wilderness does not hate you. It simply exists. Respect it. Learn its rules, and you will survive. Well, he had learned. He had survived. And now, he was ready to teach others. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again.